John here from Great Lakes Country, and today we're making the most amazing, sweet, savory, saucy, sticky pork belly burnt ends. Like any good barbecue, it's a little bit time consuming, but as far as barbecue recipes go, this is perhaps one of the easiest, or at least one of the easiest to make this good. Anyway, if you're a fan of pork or barbecue or anything in between, you're gonna love this one. So let's get right into it and take a look at the wonderful pork belly we're gonna be dealing with today. And here we've got a very nice looking half pork belly. It's got a really nice fat cap on this side. Came from the store with the skin already removed, so there's nothing I gotta do there. And to get this thing ready, I'm just gonna start by going around, seeing if there's any dangly or scraggly bits that I think are just gonna risk getting a little burnt when this thing's cooking. I'm not gonna go too crazy. It looks like they really gouged this area over here when they trimmed this thing, and I'm gonna wanna kinda smooth that out a little bit. Other than that, this thing's not looking bad. So all I've gotta do is get it cubed up. And when we're all done, we're gonna end up with little bits that are, I'd say, like 1 inch by 1 inch by 1 inch. So we need to start a little bit bigger than that because, of course, everything's gonna shrink down quite a bit while it's cooking. So I'll start by cutting this thing into strips that are, I don't know, I'm gonna say about somewhere between 1.5 inches and 2 inches. Something about like that's looking nice to me. And then we can start cutting the strips into our cubes. And real quick, let me talk about the fat cap that's on, well, this entire pork belly. Some people like to shave that down a little more when they do this before cutting it into the cubes. I really don't find that necessary. I mean, right there, that looks like a pretty thick fat cap, but you know, a ton of that's gonna render down during this cook. So I don't wanna shave it down too low and then leave basically none of that delicious fat left on there to get rendered down, maybe a little crispy. So unless you've got just a really massively thick fat cap, I really don't find it to be an essential step to trim that thing down before moving forward. Now, before we go any further, I'm gonna make a little bit of a binder, and it's super simple. We're just gonna use a little bit of honey mustard and thin it out with just a splash of some apple cider vinegar, just to make it a little more liquidy. Of course, give it a little extra flavor. I often don't use a binder when I'm applying seasoning to meat, but in the case of these pork belly burnt ends, I do think it helps a little bit. This pork belly is gonna end up having a lot of big flavors going on, so I'm not really worried about anything tasting overly mustardy or vinegary or anything like that. And now with all my cubed up pork belly pieces in a great big bowl, I'll start getting them slathered with some of that thinned out honey mustard. Not trying to absolutely drown them. I just want a very thin coating all over. Just gonna help the rub stick. Gonna add just another little element of flavor. And for our seasoning today, I'm very pleased to introduce my brand new barbecue pork rub. I've been working on and modifying and perfecting what I think is the perfect sweet and savory barbecue pork rub for a number of years now. And I finally decided to get a whole run of them produced, bottled up. These things are hot off the presses. And if you're interested, they're for sale on the GreatLakesCountry.com website right now. It's got sweet, it's got salty, it's got a little smoky, and just all the flavors that encapsulate what I think is the perfect rub for barbecue pork. I named it Superior Sweet as an homage to Lake Superior in my beautiful home state of Michigan. And no, we're not really known for barbecue, pork or otherwise. Nevertheless, we do have barbecue up here, and a lot of it is incredible. Anyway, let's get back to that pork belly. So simply enough, I'll just start applying a pretty generous coating of that seasoning all over. This is a savory rub, but it's not absolutely overwhelmed with salt, so you can go on pretty heavy, and that's how you're gonna get a beautiful bark, lots of deep caramelized flavors all over. Just give everything a good toss and mix, apply a little more. As far as barbecue pork goes, burnt ends like this are a really hard recipe to screw up. Even if you get it pretty close to what I'm doing here, they're gonna come out amazing and delicious. Now, to make this whole operation a lot easier to get on the smoker and move around as needed, I'll lay out all my cubes of pork on a wire rack, or rather a couple wire racks, and I'll make sure that they're sitting fat side up. Now we're ready to get these on the smoker. So now let's get the smoker fired up. Today I'm using the old Oklahoma Joe combo offset smoker. And as always, I'll get some good lump hardwood charcoal lit up with a couple of these little bird's nest fire starters. And when those coals are good and hot, into the firebox they go, along with a little chunk of hardwood. Today, as with most days, I'm using oak. Now we'll just let this smoker come up to temperature. I want it to get up to somewhere between 275 and 300, and that's where it's gonna stay for the entirety of our cook. So in go those pork belly bites. And yeah, this is a really small offset smoker, so I've got to do a little bit of navigating to fit both of those racks in there. And I'll definitely keep an eye on these pieces over here because they're so close to the firebox. I may end up rearranging some of these as we go, so the ones over here don't get too much heat all at once. Anyway, we're gonna let this thing crank along at 275 to 300 for the next 3 hours, or until the internal temp of these bites are somewhere between 200 and 205. In the meantime, I'll feed the fire as necessary to maintain those temps. Doesn't take a lot to keep the temperature up in this tiny smoker, but I do have to feed it pretty regularly, like every 20 minutes or so. But we'll just let it cook away and we'll check back in a little while. All right, it's been about 2.5 hours and the internal temp of our little pork bites is right around 190 to 195. And I'm actually gonna move on to the next step a little bit soon because I'm liking the color I've got here. Definitely got a really nice dark bark. I don't really wanna go too much more like this uncovered because I might worry that this is gonna just start to actually burn, and I don't want that. But they're probing incredibly tender despite not being all completely up to the 200 to 205 degrees. But anyway, I'm gonna get these all pulled off of here and get them all transferred to one of these disposable foil pans here. Now from here, we gotta add a couple more things. First, a whole bunch of sliced up pads of butter, just distributed all over top in no particular order. Why would we add more richness to fatty pork? Well, because we can. Don't ask silly questions. Next, our second round of sweetness in the form of some brown sugar. Again, just sort of liberally sprinkled over top. Just kind of eyeball it. I guess maybe I'll end up using somewhere like 1/4 cup. Just something about like that. Now for sweetness number 3, we're drizzling on some honey. Just a light little drizzle all over. Again, not really measuring here, just kind of eyeballing to make sure there's a little honey on everything. Said it before, it's really hard to screw this up. If you put a little too much or not quite enough, it's not really gonna matter. It's still gonna come out great. Now this pork is ready to go back in the smoker for, well, probably about another hour, maybe a little longer, since I did pull these a little early during the first part of the cook. But anyway, I'll get this sealed up real tight. Yeah, these pans come with some handy little foil lids. If you don't have that, obviously, just wrap it real tight with some aluminum foil. So back in we go. Still going about 275 to 300 degrees. And at this point, this pork is essentially going to start braising in its own juices and that honey and that sugar and butter as it gets all melted down. This is going to allow these little bits of pork to get even more tender and more amazing without drying them out or risking burning anything by having them exposed in here. So anyway, lid down and we'll come back in about an hour. All right, about an hour and 20 minutes later, and we're coming off the smoker once again. This is very hot, so let me try not to burn myself when I get this lid off. And at this point, these little pieces of pork are smelling absolutely delicious, but we're not quite done yet. We've still got one more thing to add. But before I do that, I've got some standing liquid in this tray and I wanna kind of strain that out of there. So let me temporarily move all of the little pork burnt ends out of this pan so I can drain it. Yeah, I guess I could have used a giant colander, but you know, I figured I'd save me one more annoying thing to wash. These little chunks are super tender, so I want to take care not to let them break apart as I grab them with these tongs. All right, now we can get all of those right back in that same pan. And now for our last ingredient, and that's some barbecue sauce. You know, this is kind of a Kansas City style dish we're making here, so I thought we should use some good Kansas City style barbecue sauce. So I'm going with some Joe's. And I don't want to go on too heavy. I'm not trying to absolutely drown these pork bites in sauce. I just want a nice light coating all over. Yeah, I could use a brush and brush them on there. Could have put some of this in one of those squeezy bottles I like. But let me see if I can just give them a gentle toss around in that sauce. That's looking really good to me. So back onto the pit one last time. So in they go, uncovered. We're gonna let them cook for about, I don't know, only like 15 or 20 minutes. We're just trying to get that sauce cooked on there, get it caramelized a little bit, make them all totally sticky and, well, amazing. And there we have it, our finished, amazing Kansas City style pork belly burnt ends. They look incredible, they smell incredible, they're ridiculously tender, and well, at this exact moment, ridiculously hot. So I'm gonna let these sit here and cool for just a couple minutes, and then we're digging in. Well, they're still pretty hot, but you know, I think I'm tired of waiting. I know everything on this camera when it's really bright outside comes out looking a lot darker and blacker than it really is in real life. So hopefully that's coming through just how beautiful that really looks. Anyway, let's do this. Mmm, they're so sweet and fatty and melt in your mouth. There's a reason people sometimes refer to these as meat candy, because that's exactly what it is. And that Joe's Kansas City sauce, that's exactly the right flavor in my opinion for a pork belly burnt end. But you know, use whatever you got, use whatever you like. There's no bad way to do this. All right, I have another. So there you have it. Super simple, super tasty barbecue pork belly burnt ends. Perfect amount of smoke, perfect amount of sweet and savory and juicy fatty goodness. As always, if you want to see the full written out recipe, I will have it in a link in the video description below. And if you're interested in checking out the Great Lakes Country Superior Sweet Pork Rub, well, of course, I'll have a link to that in the video description below as well. Give it a try, add it to your seasoning collection. You might just find that it's your new favorite for all things pork. In the meantime, be sure to like and subscribe and stay up to date with all our latest stuff, including future smoking and grilling videos. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'm John, and this is Great Lakes Country.